Right, well, it's 5:30, so I'm going to start today's webinar, which is the first in a series of webinars for White Griffin. My name is Ruth Dancer. I'm one of the founders of White Griffin. We are equine sustainability specialists, and we're going to be hosting a series of webinars over the course of the autumn and winter, covering a range of topics from next webinar, which is how to remove toxins and pollutants from your horse's environment. And we'll have specialists from a range of different areas within your horse's life, and through to water, how to reduce emissions. But we really wanted to kickstart the webinar series with what is the most pressing topic right now, which is, of course, paddock management. How do we cope with really a string of climatic challenges from the wettest period, 18 months on record, through to now what hasn't yet officially been called, but will soon be announced as the driest, hottest spring and summer on record. So we are at White Griffin intensely focused on practical solutions, not flim-flamming around with sort of sustainability ideology, but actually how do we minimize our damage to the environment and how do we cope with changes in a sustainable way? So we're really, really fortunate to be joined by two excellent specialists who can lend a full range of practical tips to small and large horse owners. And I'm going to go on to introduce them in just a moment. The structure of today's session, we've got 1 hour. We're going to be recording the session, so you'll be able to watch the recording back through our website or Equestrians for Nature. And we're going to start off with some hot tips and takes on what to do right now, given the situation we've all been experiencing with this incredibly dry weather. We're then going to deep dive a little bit into the why and the how, and particularly looking at some of those horse welfare issues and doing some myth busting. And then we're going to finish the hour with a little bit of a look ahead. What do we think is going to happen as a result of climate change? And actually, how can we better protect our paddocks and also help nature along the way? So ram-packed full of useful tips. And with that, I would like to introduce you to the powerhouse that is Annabel Holmes and Jane Caston, who are from Equine Ecology, or rather the Equine Ecologist, and Meadowmania. And I'm going to kick off straight away with Annabel. And I want you to talk to our gathered crowd of equestrians about what is an equine ecologist. Why do we work with you? What do you bring to the equestrian world? And frankly, why do we need you more than ever?
What on earth is an equine ecologist? It's essentially the marrying together of the environmental side of things, all of the sort of how the grass grows and all the creatures and everything around it, and how the horse slots into it. It's very easy to think of the horse and the environment as a completely separate thing, but actually the horse is a result of their environment. They rely heavily on it, as we're learning in this drought how important our environment is for our horses. So what I do is kind of translate that connection into something that will actually help you create doable steps in what you're trying to do for your horse and for your land. So my background's in ecology, also a horse mad person. Marry it together, there I am.
Ecology and horse mad person equals equine ecologist. There we go.
Yeah.
That's the pathway in life. And frankly, we were talking before everyone jumped on today that where I happen to be in my office is totally flanked on all sides by paddocks, and every single one of them is completely raised to a military style haircut of there's just nothing there apart from happily this particular location has got loads of hedgerows, which is great. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I think that webinars can start very dull and you have to wade through a lot before you get to some top tips. So I'm just going to go right in there with you and say, what can we do right now? How can we save our paddocks based on what has happened over the last few months?
So it's been a bit of a wild one, isn't it? It's really toasted off. I mean, everywhere I've been going now, it's just brown stuff everywhere unless you're further north or near some water and you're a bit luckier and you've got some green stuff.
Is
But
that the official ecologist summary of flora and
green
fauna?
stuff,
It's brown stuff and green stuff. You don't
brown.
have to worry about Latin names. Come on, White Griffin's all about get rid of the babble, make it relatable. So we're just going to talk about brown stuff and green stuff for the next hour.
Yeah,
Are you okay with
yeah,
that, Jane? Let's not do
I think
technical
this
names.
year it's relevant, yeah.
yeah. uh, yes.
So what do
So,
we do with the brown stuff, Annabelle?
so the brown stuff. So it's realistically it is just really lacking water. So there are some things we can do, but it's sort of dependent on a little bit of water at the moment. So at the moment, rain dancing for everyone. And, and then we can start to look at the longer term and thinking about if this happens again and again, or, you know, dealing with the unpredictability. You know, we've had really, really soggy summers, followed by really, really hot summers. We're seeing this really crazy changing. Then we need to start looking at, we need resilient paddocks that are going to cope with these drastic changes. And I think this, well, the really wet year and this really dry year has been alarm bells for everyone. We need to do something about it. What on earth do we do? So there's really easy things we can do. I have a bit of a first aid kit, which are things that you can just crack on and do that will help in some way. It may not cure everything, it won't cure everything, but if you do these things, it will help you along the way to a more resilient setup, and then you can do more refined things along paired with it. So straight into it. So the first one is rest. That is so, so important. It may feel pointless at the moment because nothing's really growing, but as soon as I know here I've got a little bit of rain forecast later in the week, so I'm just leaving grass well alone for now, and just giving it a bit of time, because the more we graze it, the more damage we're doing to it. You're going to be setting it back further, so the recovery is going to be slower or less obvious. So if you can rest even some of it, that's going to make a big difference. And that should be something, a principle going forward, is to rest areas and introduce some rotational grazing or whatever works for you. The next thing is mulching. So that's not something that we can really do as it's so dry, but as it gets a little bit wetter, we can introduce mulching, and that's where you're using sort of hay sweepings, that sort of stuff, just some old hay, and sprinkling it not too thickly over some bare patches in your field. So it might be around your gateways, it might just be the whole lot in this in this weather, but getting a thin layer so you can still see the ground a little bit, but just enough so you've got a cover. Ideally it should be damp, so it's starting to break down and it's holding the moisture in the soil. So what that does is creates like a little microclimate for the soil to recover. There also might be some seeds in the hay that will help bolster the grass population or other plants. And that will just help things along as we hopefully start to get a bit wetter and a bit cooler. That will sort of speed up that process. And then the other parts of the first aid kit are maybe a little bit less relevant immediately, but so that's aeration and cutting and grazing. So the aeration part, I wouldn't go straight into it now because the ground's probably rock hard at the moment, but aeration can just help where things have become really compacted, although I would say we do tend to over aerate sometimes, thinking that horses are compacting loads, but actually they can't compact too deeply. So you don't need to go too crazy with it. You don't need massive plant machinery to do it. You can just help it along, and time aerates the soil as well. Moles, worms, they do it all for you. But aeration can just help things along if it's been really dry and really hard. And then cutting or grazing. This is more for if you've got like it in that really wet year, we had loads of stuff growing like crazy. Or we had some patches of things that we didn't particularly want so much, we can cut them. And also cutting, I think Jane will probably talk a little bit about this, but cutting can be paired with seeding and all of that, which can help shift the plant dynamics and things in the fields. Yeah, but the resting and the mulching particularly are really, really key as we come out of this summer.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Annabelle. And I think that's a great segue straight into Jane. Jane, you are very much more than just a seed seller. Your knowledge and expertise extends into a range of areas of equine and horticulture. Tell us a little bit about what's the difference between what you do and what you know versus what a lot of people traditionally do, and how does your company help with that? How does it how and why are you the future, essentially, I would say.
Okay, so I guess traditionally paddocks have been managed often with a focus on fast-growing, high-yielding grasses, perennial ryegrass typically, grown as a monoculture to provide quick, dense grazing. And while this works in the short term and it achieves that goal to an extent, it also carries risks. Laminitic prone horses and ponies may struggle with the high sugars in the perennial ryegrass. The monoculture is prone to be overgrazed. It's not drought resilient. It's just generally not resilient. As Annabelle's saying, that is the word. A multi-species sward is just so much more resilient than the monoculture that we've traditionally turned our ponies and horses out on. So we're trying to move away from that. We're working with our customers to create thriving biodiverse spaces that provide grazing for the horses, but also support their well-being, encourage natural behaviours in them, foraging, improve their gut microbiomes, and also just work generally with the land to restore the land. Going back to Annabelle's point again about the two are not separate. It's not the horse and the land. The two are intrinsically linked, and we're trying to improve them and make a biodiverse environment for the horses that benefits their health. So yes, that's what we're working with our customers.
And I mean, we're very accustomed to using words like, creating a biodiverse
Mm.
space, but
Mm.
for some people that doesn't necessarily mean anything or it's not important.
Mm.
Based on your knowledge and your background, what is the importance of a biodiverse space? What does that mean to you? And actually, what have you seen in terms of the way your clients have coped with these changes in climate and how that's helped them?
Well, I think it gives everybody a much broader perspective, which is always good, and
Mm.
it gives everybody a longer looking. You're not concerned with immediate fixes. That's not going to happen. It's a long-term approach to bringing the land back round to being more biodiverse, having more species, being more resilient. So I think that helps. But yeah. Just the equine benefits are multiple. The more natural diet, the mental stimulation, the improved gut health, the behavioral balance,
Mm.
and then the ecosystem is just benefiting as a whole from habitats for insects, small mammals. It's the soil health that the different structures of roots in the different species in the sward bring, the nitrogen fixing qualities of different legumes, the minerals that certain wildflowers bring for horses grazing. It all just combines to make it a better environment for the horse and a more resilient environment for everything, really. With fewer inputs, then it's bringing in beneficial insects. It's bringing in, as I say, the nitrogen fixing qualities. It just all results in fewer inputs that we have to put in that aren't natural.
And that, to me, that all makes complete sense that, of course, you would do that. And of course, you both meet your clients at different points on their journey of understanding of, when they come to you, they've probably not done anything yet, but made a decision to do it. Why do you think all of our paddocks aren't wonderful biodiverse spaces, resilient to nature and have all these wonderful things? Why do you think we haven't got there yet? Or is that a big question?
Who wants to go? I can go if you want.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go for you. I guess
Okay.
tradition, but yeah, go.
I think, like loads of other industries, we're a bit stuck in
Mm.
tradition.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, stabling is sort of a hangover from the Victorian era, and it's still really standard for people to do stable field. And I think, like Jane was saying, there was that really big push to have that fast growing ryegrass stuff and just more coming out of it. And as horse owners, we generally come into land ownership or land management through riding horses, learning to ride, rather than farmers that come into
Mm.
it through the land and learning the land. So it's no wonder that a horse owner who, you know, has had hours and hours of riding lessons and knows the ins and outs of biomechanics and everything,
Mm.
but give them a field and it's like giving them a newborn baby that, you know, for the first time, you're just like,
Yeah,
what do I do
I
with
think
it?
there's a lack of confidence
Mm,
in respect to how to go about it, which hopefully we're doing something today to try to combat. But yeah, I
exactly.
agree
Yeah.
with Annabel.
Yeah.
And I think, from our perspective at White Griffin, it's a little bit of a sort of sad success that our job has become a lot easier in the last few years because we are in this country, at least at the beginning of actually being in climate change. We know, as you were describing, Annabelle, that these sudden, bizarre fluctuations, the lack of predictability of what's going to happen when, has made it much easier for myself and my colleagues to say that climate change is real, that biodiversity loss is real, and that it does directly impact our sport. And so the narrative has shifted a little from we need to do the right thing to help the planet to we need to do the right thing to help the planet because our horses and our sport is now being affected. You can see it with your eyes. And I'm just curious to know, we do that on a almost more theoretical, semi-corporate basis with our clients, but you're both physically with your clients in their fields. And I'm curious to know, what have you seen with your own eyes in terms of how the land has changed on your clients' premises, and the differences of challenges and also the differences of attitudes of the clients you're now coming to see? Annabelle, I'll
You
start
want
with
to go
you because
first?
you're on the screen.
Yeah. So I am fine. Well, so I've been seeing some clients for the last few years, and I've been getting more and more clients that are, I would say, worried about what's happening and what that means for their horses, and a lot more people thinking, wow, I need to be self-sufficient. I need to start making this a closed system.
Mm,
Whereas sort of when I first started out, it was more like a nice to have
Mm.
more nature on your site. And I'm definitely seeing a shift of more and more people being like, right, I need to, like, especially this year with the hay yields being lower, a lot
mm.
of people thinking, how am I going to feed my horses, rather than, oh, isn't it lovely to put some more trees on, kind of thing, which is still
Yeah.
nice and it's still brilliant. And I think
Yeah.
it is really lovely. But there is definitely more urgency I've found on the ground, and sort of a lot of people being more creative and experimental as well, which is really awesome to see.
And Jane, with that again, do you find you're not having to, like you say, talk about making a field look pretty anymore? You're actually being able to have quite nice grown-up conversations about, look, we don't do these things just because we might happen to like butterflies. We're
No,
doing these
absolutely.
things because those butterflies and bees and
Yeah,
birds and small mammals and invertebrates
yeah,
and enable you to maintain your horse.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
have a function. Is that, would you say that's sort of
I think so, definitely, and definitely this summer, I've noticed a huge increase in customers' awareness and concern, and a lot of people have been hard hit with the very dry period we've had, and they are wanting to mitigate the climate change impact that we're having. and make their land more resilient. So that's definitely been conversations that we've been having a lot more this year. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, people are putting everything together now, and we need to do something about this, and this is the time. So yes, a lot of talk about multi-species swords, just to give the paddocks as much of a chance to be resilient to drought, or indeed heavy rains, should we have them in the winter. Yeah.
And it's an interesting one because we had a question in advance of today's webinar, which was what does the latest research tell us? Has the science changed? And I'm interested to know, Jane, your perspective on this, because from ours, it's quite. Some people may disagree with me, but the science actually hasn't changed. We've known since the 1800s the impact of using fossil fuels
Mm.
in terms of the atmosphere. We have known that on a fundamental basis, if you far more intensively degrade the
Mm.
sand, it leads to the land, it leads to soil degradation, which in turn
Mm.
leads to biodiversity loss. The core themes of the strands of sustainability, water usage, biodiversity
Mm.
loss, emissions, haven't changed. And actually, the way we should steward and manage the land is very much how we used to do things. But do you agree with that, or do you think research and the science has changed, and what we need to do now is different, and there's something new to learn?
Well, there's always new things to learn, but I agree more with you. It's almost looking backwards to how things were done years and years ago. There is a move towards more natural remedies for any situation, really, a more organic approach to the environment. So it's trying to avoid chemical inputs. These things that we know now to have the effect, the knock-on effect of eliminating insects from our countryside. And that all comes together in this need to fix, rewild is maybe not the right word, but to certainly restore the
Mm.
countryside, and that includes the vast amount of land that's taken up for grazing, and that's yeah, and to improve our horses' welfare.
And that's interesting, isn't it, Annabel? Because you answered the one of the previous questions. Perhaps we're doing things the way we're doing at the moment because we're a traditional sport. But again, I feel conflicted in that
Yeah,
because what we're really
this is
saying is,
cyclical.
yeah, tradition is actually good, and we historically have always, we as human beings, but actually we as equestrians have always been good stewards of the land. Our sport is outside. We predominantly enjoy it because you get to be in the countryside and in nature, and that naturally typically makes you look after nature because when you're aware of it, something, you're more likely to take care of it. If you value it, you'll take care of it. So, in a way, Annabelle, leaping back to you, that the idea of, sort of, it's a traditional sport, maybe it was just a bit of a blip in the way that we did things, and actually the damage that we've done to biodiversity, again, it's almost a moment in time, isn't it? And do you think
Mm.
by going back to these measures and the work that you advocate for, can we restore biodiversity in the way that we want and need to?
Yeah, I'd say traditional from a certain point, and it's probably a military thing from some blokes in the past. It always is some blokes in the past, isn't it?
Annabelle, don't say that. I
No,
hope it. I hope it. You fly police onto me. You can't say that. Stop recording. We'll restart.
sorry. So, like, it's usually the sport has at a point gone in some direction. But anyway, the management stuff, nature always knows best, always. But I think, yes, we need to look way back, but some of those things we can't do anymore. Back
Right.
then, we didn't have fences, we didn't have hedges in the same way that we have hedges now. We didn't have the laws, the planning laws, the roads, the pollution, the things we're up against now didn't weren't a thing that we were up against or nature was up against in the
Mm.
past. So I think yes, we look back to that, as things that we should be looking to aim towards and things that we can take from, like, way back. For example, things that I've recommended are for getting through this drought is like looking at feeding tree branches and hedgerows and things to supplement the grass as well, just as a bit more forage, which is something that the old boys back in the day with their workhorses used to do when they had a lack of hay. But I think we've got all this ability to research, we've got all this connectivity, we've got all of this information available to us, and resource, but we've also got different limitations, and we can bring both of those together and sort of have a new approach to it all, if that makes sense. We've
Yeah, it
got
does.
we've got a modern version of what we are going towards in the future. So sort of rewilding people tend to say about creating connections rather than restoring or conserving a thing of the past. We're restoring the connections between biodiversity. And I think that's a good approach now because, we're finding that species are responding differently to the differing temperatures. Increased wind levels, are going to change what plants are going to cope better in different areas. And so I think we're launching into the unknown. I think we need to just, be a bit, what's the word? Receptive to what we can see going on around us and use the tools that we've got.
I think that is such an important point because you hear again, and I had a lovely call with a client a couple of weeks ago who's having difficulties with her paddocks. She's on we're going to come on to this in a minute, but she's on a hill and essentially, and the bottom is just a boggy quagmire and it's floods and it's very problematic. And she was asking for some guidance and she said, so I think the answer to every question should be the answer and plant a tree. So whatever the question is, hi, my name's Annabel and plant a tree. And I think that's true, but I also think we do have to be a little bit careful because I think a lot of people think the concept of rewilding is just leave nature be, let it do its thing. But like you say, Annabelle, we've gone past that point, haven't we? We have effectively dominated the globe in such a way that you can't go, oh, sorry, and leave it now. We have to manage our way out of it. So everything is now, it's not a wild scenario, it's a managed wild scenario. And it even to the point of the ongoing debate between only planting native trees in Britain versus actually our climate has changed. We need trees that are resilient to what our climate is and will become so that they will survive, which might mean it's not a native tree. And that does cause a great deal of debate, I know, amongst even the big charities in this country. So it isn't as simple as just hand it over to nature and everything will be fine. But as you say, learn the lessons from nature and watch what it does and understand what it needs. And on the topic of understand what it needs, I want to move across to the relationship between what you guys do and horse welfare. And Jane, you've already touched on this a little bit, but there is a huge amount that we can say about horse welfare and paddock management. So perhaps I'll start back with you again, Jane, that horse welfare is always our primary concern. Even as environmentalists, it's our primary concern that we want to take care of the horse over and above. But what we always say is there is no horse welfare without environmental sustainability. You can't have a healthy horse in an unhealthy planet. And I think that it goes hand in hand to a point, but then there are challenges. So what are the benefits that you've seen from a horse welfare point of view of your process and planting and herbal lays and that sort of thing?
Well, first and foremost would be the increased variety in their foraging. If you're looking at planting a diverse sward, but also horse-friendly hedging. That's just another a source of foraging for horse all year round with interesting hips and berries and all sorts in the autumn. It's providing shelter for the horses in the strong winds, as we're saying, the weather is changing, and it's bringing in other wildlife into the horse's environment. So yeah, I mean the main benefits are to the behavioural improvements, just in terms of the horse foraging in a more natural environment. It can eliminate some behavioural problems that boredom horses suffer from in more traditional environments. And also, as I was saying before, the trace minerals and things that some species have, like sainfoin's a natural wormer, so that therefore eliminates maybe the need to be having to treat things like this so much. Ribworts, a rich source of calcium, all sorts of wildflowers have these trace minerals that is beneficial to a horse to selectively graze. And it just adds to their diet and their overall health.
I think sainfoin's a really interesting example. I'm in Gloucestershire, and we used to have fields and fields and fields of it. I think I might have this wrong, but I think that Her Royal Highness Princess Anne's fields were actually called that because they were so dominant in it. That was their old English name. And I when I've looked into it, not only as you say, do they have this, it has this wonderful medicinal quality, and frankly, worming has been one of the hot topics in veterinary care for a good long while now. But in addition to that, it's incredibly long rooted. And we know that if you have those deep roots, you're able to create healthier soil, which in turn creates more resilient soil, which in turn means you're not going to get such terrible poaching. It's going to be able to cope with both the horse's impact, but the climatic impact as well. You're going to sequester more carbon. Sorry, mumbo jumbo. You're going to be able to store more carbon, which is beneficial to climate change, or mitigating it at least. So why do we not have more of that? Why is it everyone I speak to has never even heard of it? But I know it's in your mixes.
I don't know why it's the decrease in popularity as such. Again, I just think it comes back to this sort of traditional approach where we have gone down the route of the monoculture and the perennial ryegrass just through ease and the speed at which it established and the high yields that it gives. It's just this lack of awareness, I think, of and not just in an equestrian environment, but in the nature at a whole. We've lost that connection with some of the species in the countryside. We don't know the names of plants the way we used to. There's that Robert Macfarlane quote. It's something like, we won't save what we don't love, and we rarely love what we cannot name. And we don't know the names of plants. We don't know where they live and how their particular adaptations to their environment, and what minerals or what they might bring to us, how they can be used medicinally. I think we've just lost that knowledge, and it's important to bring that knowledge back somehow to make people aware of how important it is.
That is so incredibly important and powerful, isn't it? I think we could probably talk on that for hours. But I want to flip to the other side of the coin, and perhaps Annabel, you and I have discussed this a little bit in the past. The flip side of the coin, whereby, particularly perhaps if you're working with liveries, but not specifically, where people are concerned about the negative impact on horse welfare of some of the changes that you might be advocating for, which will help with paddock management. What sort of things are people concerned about, and are indeed genuine areas where we have to be careful and we have to think about the horse welfare and managing that?
Yeah, so I think it can be very easy to fall into a black and white viewpoint on how we manage our horses, and you can be on one side or the other and think the other is worse or not. And I'd say, I always go on about this, there is no one size fits all. There is no one perfect everywhere. Every horse has different needs. everyone has, different resources, time, support available to them at the time. And so what's going to work on one property in one field is not going to work next door or the other side of the country. So it's really variable. Um, and I'd say so, I could recommend something completely different depending on the scenario. And it is a case, particularly on liveries and things, of sort of helping everyone involved to understand the benefits of a change, and that might be going to visit somewhere where it's worked really well, um, and just maybe even taking tiny steps towards some changes. You don't have to go from DIY livery with individual paddocks and stables, and that's been working for you, to suddenly like bam, track systems, equine systems, all straight off the bat. You don't have to do that straight away. You could just start with the things I said before, a bit of resting, a bit of mulching, and just see how it goes. And if it works for you and works for everyone and it's positive, maybe try a little bit more, but you don't need to go all in. If you want to go all in, go for it.
So maybe it might be useful to have a look at those approaches to different styles of paddocks and then move on to the myth busting, because that's at the heart of it, isn't it? Every horse is an individual and every horse owner is an individual, like you say. So we go and put up a PowerPoint of this is the perfect way to care for nature and your horse. Just do these things and you're done. It doesn't exist. So what general rules can we talk about when we think about, maybe let's start with the old small paddock, big paddock. And I can't tell you the number of times when I've had somebody say, it's so much harder because I've only got an acre, and someone else say, it's so hard, I've got 30 acres. Each thinks that their job is harder to do. One is too big to manage and it's very costly. The other is too small to be able to do anything other than what they're already doing. So how do we convince the small and the large landowner that you can do something? How would you approach those? If let's say the people on the call are split 50-50, half of them have got a huge property and half of them have got a small property, how would you guide them?
Yeah. So first, I'd say they're both right.
No, they're both wrong. Don't give people excuses.
No, so it is. I mean, advice from an acre to hundreds of acres, and it's completely different at both ends, and those problems are completely valid on both ends of it, and how you approach it on different ones is very different. Um, but essentially sort of the principles are the same. Try and find a way that you can do some resting, you can increase some biodiversity with that resting, and pairing it with some of the other things like the mulching and the seeding, and you know things like the time of year that you graze it will bring up different things. So there's ways that you can make it work for you. Again, sorry, what, no one size fits all. There's no hard and fast rules, like you said, but you can make the situation work. And I've seen people with tiny properties really make it work. I've seen people with hundreds of acres really make it work. You just need to trust yourself to experiment with it, and find what works and get the help if you need it, or if you're feeling a bit unsure, but the land can be quite forgiving of a bit of experimenting in the hope of helping it. As long as you are sort of sticking to those basics of that first aid kit, you're going to be taking some steps to at least minimize damage rather than getting any worse.
And thinking, Jane, about different types of properties, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that everyone has a sort of a neat postage stamp of flat, maybe starting off with a monocultured type of paddock, and that you then whistle in with a magic fairy wand and turn it into an Instagrammer's paradise. But A, I don't think that's what you do. And B, actually, a lot of people we deal with, maybe they're on a hill. And as I was saying with my client earlier, really struggling with sort of quite stony ground at the top and then very boggy, flood-prone ground at the bottom. And you can't just, to be uh, somewhat ridiculous about it, throw a load of wild seeds at it and hope that it's going to turn into a biodiverse paradise. So how, in your approaches, how do you tackle those incredibly different horse owner and horse properties?
I suppose it's really about working with those contours and natural requirements rather than trying to bend them to
Mm,
fit, as you say, the sort of general what seed mix. So it's really looking at each individual property, and even within that property, the requirements of different sections of the land. So, you know, keep high traffic areas and water away from the bottom of slopes, that sort of thing, where flooding and poaching might be more prevalent. Think about where you're putting shelters and feed areas. Make sure they're always on well-drained ground. Improve the drainage of the land if you can by aerating, by introducing those deeper-rooted species that will improve things. And as Annabel was saying, you know, rest the land when you can, rotationally graze to let stressed areas recover. But it's really what we're trying to do is work with what is there,
mm,
and introduce species that are you know, have adapted to cope with those conditions. We have a seed mix for waterlogged fields, so
okay.
it includes species that cope with those conditions and will do a lot better than other species that you might be trying to introduce. So it's really working with nature rather than trying to fit it into some, as you say, this ideal Instagram image. It's never going to work.
And that's a mindset thing again, coming back to something you said a couple of times, Jane, that yes, it is about practically the physical thing you're going to go outside and do. But it
Mm.
starts with that mindset change of A, I'm going to respect and enjoy
Yeah.
nature and I want it to live in my yard and on my spaces.
Mm.
And B, whilst I understand I have the ability to change it, I need to work with nature. I need to listen to what the land's telling me it wants to
Yeah.
be. If it wants to be a pond,
Yes.
stop trying to make it
Well,
be
actually,
a
yes.
paddock or
Make it a pond, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Create
Mm.
a water source for your
Yeah,
horses
exactly.
and shift things around and maybe introduce track systems that give them more
Avoid.
rest
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will say, well, it's all very well, you keep telling me to rest the land, but I don't have enough land to rest it and I don't
Mm.
want to stable my horses. And so there are compromises to be had there in terms of maybe the horses need to be kept away for longer than you would like to help the land, but by helping the land, the horse is going to get a better quality of forage and a more interesting experience outside. So it's working with the land and working with the horse and meeting both of their needs for an
Mm.
overall greater good, which is a mindset shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and we're very, very good at being a little bit southern UK focused in a you know sometimes in the horse world, but of course you guys and we work with the full length and breadth of the country, and I'm curious to know if actually there are significantly different experiences, maybe north south or even east west. We know that the east part of our country is semi-arid. It's has very, very chronic water shortage problems all the time. Again, do you almost have to geographically think differently, or do you think it's way more localized and actually two farms next to one another can be just as different as if you were in Newcastle versus Devon? Maybe Jane.
It is localized, I would say. I mean, there are trends, obviously. This year, it's been fairly countrywide, the drought, and it's been less. There've been less variety, certainly. Conversations we've had all tend to be of that nature. You know, we have a lot of brown stuff, as Annabel put it earlier. What can we do? But in general, you know, in the northeast, we would be looking at maybe heavier soil, so we would focus on different species to introduce there. And traditionally in the southwest, it might be traditionally more drought, experiencing more drought. So we would be looking at drought tolerant species. But certainly, sort of Chewing's fescue, for instance, is a very drought-resistant variety species that is in quite a few of our mixes. So, but yeah, it can vary from one field to the next, really, in terms of what the soil type is or what the specific requirements are. So it really is looking at each property, each site as an individual, individually, and advising from there.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I wonder whether maybe that also leads to why people find it difficult to shift, because it's not necessarily the case that you can just have that conversation with your neighbour and you can all do the same thing, that actually this is quite an individual process, which is difficult. We've got 15 minutes left, and in the it's very, very important to me that we have your hot take on what to do next, what to do in the future, and the practical skills of how can you help them. But before we do that, we've got either some things that I have commonly heard, or my colleague Zoe, or some of the questions that came in, and they're all around somewhat common myth-busting questions. So fairly short and sharp. Annabel, first for you, you've actually mentioned this already, track systems, which I suspect everyone on the call or watching the webinar will know what a track system is, but essentially it's a means of portioning out the land to enable it to rest whilst giving the horse plenty of exercise. But are track systems good or bad for soil? If you've got horses going over a smaller amount of soil, surely that degrades the soil more, Annabel. Yes or no? Are they good or bad for soil?
Yes and no.
Oh, come on!
Sorry. So it depends how you manage it. Completely same with the field. Depends how you manage it. I've seen ones that really go for it, some that really don't. And if you feel like it is doing that, you can put measures in place to stop it eroding so much. Perhaps you can rotate areas that you're using, you can put some reinforcement in, you can use sort of buffer areas, you can use some mulching, these sorts of things to help. It sort of depends on what your aim is with the track. It could be for horse health, in which case, you're a bit more tied what you can do.
Yeah.
But I've seen tracks used to manage the land. The land has always had traffic on it. It's always had animals moving across it. Bare ground isn't essentially the worst thing. Anyway, I could go on for a long time about it. I know we're running out of time. But yeah, if it is, there's things you can do.
Okay. Jane, I'm going to throw this next one at you, which I think we hear every day when we recommend using different planting systems, or indeed any of your herbal lane seed options. Surely my horse will get laminitis. I can't possibly let my horse have a varied diet. It will get sick.
I actually think that the monoculture of perennial ryegrass is high in the sugars that can trigger laminitis, and having that varied sward with other species, including legumes and the odd wildflower, is a much better environment for any laminitic horses and ponies. Absolutely. A move away from that monoculture is definitely the best approach.
Yeah. What I have to say, for the sake of any future legal disputes, if somebody wishes to switch, we definitely would recommend it, but we'd also recommend speaking to your equine first if your horse has any specific issues. What about, I'm going to stay with you, Jane. What about clean sport and risk of contamination? The dreaded poppy creeping in,
right,
and other banned substances. It's something that the industry takes extremely seriously. NOx guidelines are really, really serious. So can we have a biodiverse space that still enables a clean sport, or do we have to treat different types of horses that are used in competition somewhat differently?
Yeah, I think more care can be taken in certain environments, and I suppose sort of plant biosecurity is something that would need to be assessed and taken quite seriously in certain equine environments, such as the sport. absolutely don't want any poppies to be in any of the paddocks. But yeah, it is just keeping on top of it, isn't it? Having those management plans, and it's managing the land. It's going back to that what we were saying earlier. All this is possible and important, but it all takes management. It's not a natural process in that the way that it needs managing. So
It
yeah,
does feel sometimes that we've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater a little bit, taking a totally purist approach to my horse can only have this and nothing comes anywhere near for fear of a very small number of high risk
yeah,
toxins. Whereas actually we can take a sensible approach and introduce
yeah.
variety without risk. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach.
Not at all. And the more options the horses have for grazing, the more variety in the sward, the less condensed or concentrated anything that they do eat is going to be. I mean, Annabel will be a better knowledge on this. The greater choice they're very good at making their own choices, as we've talked about before, and avoiding things that shouldn't they shouldn't be ingesting. But I think there's certain environments where you do have to be very careful.
One for you, Annabel, that we hear all the time. It's far too expensive to look after nature. Presumably, Annabel, all of your clients are rich, are they?
No, so no, it's not expensive to look at. It's as expensive as you make it. If you want to get all the big expensive things, you can. But if you're on a small budget, or no budget, resting your field or a portion of your field is not going to be particularly expensive. Mulching, if you've got some old hay that the horse hasn't eaten, that's free. But well, you've bought it, but it's free now. Horse mats. but but if you do these basic things, you're already taking the steps to help nature. If you just let things grow up a bit more, that's not costing you anything really. You could invest more into, the drainage and all of that kind of stuff. But if you haven't got that budget, just start small and do the little things. I mean, the whole Equicentral system was thought up on a small budget and lots of creativity. Yeah, so no, it's not.
You just have to want to do it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that unfortunately our modern society is embed into most of us, I think I would definitely include myself in here, I'm no saint. We like instant gratification in 2025. And I suspect that for both of you, what we are all recommending on this call in terms of thinking about nature and doing things differently, it's going to take time to restore a paddock. How do we manage people's expectations in that sense?
So I tend to think of it as timescale. So where we work in seconds and minutes and things, nature's working in years, decades and things. So we're on this big, it gets very philosophical and, we're zooming right out onto this big timescale. But what I tend to see is when you first get going with it, you can sometimes have setbacks and things that come along. You think, oh, am I going right? But it will quite often snowball. So if you can sort of look for the little changes, the little things, so get to know what's growing on your land and think, oh, I've got some little whatever starting to grow there. I'll find out what that is. And if you sort of zoom in to the small stuff, you can see more exciting things as you go. Sort of setting like a baseline for it, even if you're just taking some pictures and just seeing your start point and just seeing it at its absolute worst. Take the pictures of the really muddy field in the wet year, take the picture of that barren dry stuff in the really dry year before you start doing anything, because when you start doing things, you won't, unless you're sort of keeping an eye on it and you look back to those original things, you won't realize how far you've come. So I think it's really important to sort of document where you're at, because you'll surprise yourself of how far you've come.
Oh, that's such an important point. Time has whizzed by. We've got just over 5 minutes. And I want to make sure that we wrap up on the practical changes. So, Jane, where, aside from visiting your website, Meadowmania, and reaching out to you directly, for anyone watching the webinar and thinks, I really want to do this, I get it, I'm committed to it. What do I do? What are my first steps? How do I adapt? Where do I go to get help as I look forward now into autumn and winter and I don't know what to do? What would your advice to them be?
Well, the autumns, if you're paddocks, or if you want to, if they're looking poached and awful and burnt to a crisp after the summer we've had, now would be a good time to oversow with a diverse grass mix. Bring some more species into the sward. It's a good time to sow wildflowers, even a small patch of wildflowers as a buffer strip, a corner of a field that's not particularly fertile, that can be somewhere to sow some wildflowers to bring some more biodiversity into the patch. Definitely rest the land, as we've talked about, to allow the plants to recover. And plants that have managed to get through the summer to reseed. Even small things like adding microhabitats to a field, some log piles, some shallow ponds, some stones, just create habitats that benefit nature as a whole, and will bring in those insects, amphibians, small mammals. But really, at the moment, we are encouraging overseeding, should you really have been hit hard by the summer weather. If you've been thinking about moving towards a more varied sward, now is a good time to if you're going to be overseeding to renovate a paddock anyway, now is the time to be thinking about what grass mix you're using, and as I said earlier, fitting it to the conditions that you're dealing with. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And Annabelle, as you were mentioning, I know we're certainly due some rain, I think from tomorrow and potentially every day. And you've mentioned to me before, I think when we were with a client, don't wait for one day of rain. We need a fair bit, and then do exactly what Jane's suggesting of get seeding. Is that right, Annabelle? Would you say that's next steps? Just wait for the rain and then off you go?
Yeah, with a lot of the things like I've recommended and what Shane's recommended, water's quite a key part of that. So if we can get a few days of rain that are, substantial to rehydrate the ground after being so parched, particularly if you're on clay soils and things where it's gone really tight and hard, it's going to take a little bit longer for it to recover.
Well, thank you so much for that. And if anyone has any further questions or needs any further help, you can reach out to us directly at White Griffin, either through our website, or you can contact me at ruth@whitegriffin.co.uk. And certainly Jane is available through Meadowmania, through meadowmania.co.uk. And Annabel can be reached either through us or through info@equineecologist.co.uk. We're all available and we're all incredibly passionate about helping every single corner of the equestrian world to make space for nature at their yard, and do it in line with horse welfare. We believe in it passionately, and we believe that the community of equestrians as a whole can actually have a profound impact on our ecosystem. So please do reach out. Don't sit there in silence wondering what on earth to do with the brown stuff. So I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Jane and Annabel for today. We really appreciate you giving our time. A lot of has been mentioned in the past hour about water. There is no getting away from it. Water is going to be one of the biggest topics alongside land management in the coming years. And so, as I said, the next couple of webinars, first of all, will be dealing with toxins in our environment, and then moving on to how can we maintain, use water, much needed water in our equestrian environment. So we'll be reflecting on a lot of what Jane and Annabelle have said in terms of how and why we need it in our paddocks and what you can do to help that, but also just around the yard. So do keep your eyes open on our social media and on our website for the next few webinars. And feel free to keep your eye out for Equestrians for Nature. We'll be posting up the webinars onto there, and there will soon be an industry location for all of these webinars as well, which is exciting news, and that will be announced soon. But for now, I want to wish you a very happy bank holiday week for those of you who are on holiday, but you're never on holiday when you've got horses, and hope to see you at our next webinar later in the month. Thank you, everybody.